Hello. Coming after 5 tastings of New Zealand Chardonnays from Cymru River, I thought it would be great to look at a White Burgundy as a contrast. So the wine I have here today is Domaine de Bellene's Bourgogne Clos de la Chapelle Chardonnay from the 2020 vintage. And this is a wine made by a producer called Nicolas Potel. And his story begins in Volnay, where his parents, Francois and Gerard, owned and ran one of the top estates there, Domaine de Pousse. And I think it was always expected that Nicolas would take over the running of the estate from his father, Gerard. And so he spent time working, learning his trade with other producers in Burgundy and around the world. Unfortunately, his father had to sell the estate in 1996, the year before Gerard died. So when Nicolas came back in 1996, he ended up, instead of taking over his father's domain, he ended up starting his own negociant business, which he called Maison Nicolas Potel. His approach was to source grapes from top quality parcels and to work closely with the growers to try and improve the quality of the fruit that they were producing. And this approach brought great critical acclaim and success to Nicolas. And by 2002, he was producing somewhere in the region of 120 wines from 50 different appellations. In 2004, the Cottin brothers, who owned a larger negociant, Laborie-Roi, acquired Nicolas' business, but kept him on to run it until 2009. Domaine de Bellene is an estate in Beaune, which Nicolas now runs. In fact, he started buying vineyards in 2005 when he bought Domaine Pousse in Beaune. Now, initially he bottled these wines under his own name on the Domaine Nicolas Potel label. And the estate had plots right across Burgundy with 9 different Premier Cru sites. And the estate's vineyards have some incredible vine age. In fact, some of the youngest are 50 years old. And the oldest is a Premier Cru Climat of Les Grèves, where the vines are 110 years old. So it was in 2008 that Nicolas rebranded his estate as Domaine de Bellene, and today he runs that alongside a new negociant business which he's built up. It's called Maison de Bellene. Domaine de Bellene has 24 hectares of vineyards in total. These are situated in Beaune, in Nuits-Saint-Georges, in Saint-Romain, in Saint-Denis, in Volnay and in Volnay. And the wines he makes are predominantly red wines made from Pinot Noir, with quality levels varying from Premier Cru to village level and regional wines. While the reds make up most of the portfolio, there are also some white wines coming from vineyards in Meursault. There's a Beaune Premier Cru. There are wines from Saint-Romain and Saint-Denis. There are several like this single plot Ludi wines labelled as Bourgogne Blanc, made from Chardonnay, and then he also makes an Alagote. The domain farms all its vineyards completely organically, and its headquarters are in a 16th century building in the middle of Beaune. This building's been completely restored, and they took real care to do this according to HQE standards, so high environmental quality standards. Harvest is done entirely by hand and try to keep vinification as natural as possible with as few inputs. So fermentation goes on with the indigenous yeasts that are either on the fruit as it comes in from the vineyard or already established in the winery. They don't add sugar, there's no chaptalization, they don't acidify, they don't add enzymes, and they don't add nutrients for the yeast either. Other environmental and sustainable approaches, they use are lightweight bottles, although I have to say I don't feel this one's particularly lightweight. Possibly this is a change that's been introduced since 2020. Sealing the wine with wax, as gone on here, has been done in the interests of sustainability, evidently, so as not to use aluminium or plastic, and the wine labels are made with recycled paper. As for the Clos de la Chapelle Vineyard, that's a vineyard with a clay limestone soil and an east-southeast exposure. Evidently it slopes at 5.5 degrees, and this sits at an altitude of 336 metres above sea level on a hill just outside the town of Beaune itself, called the Maison de Bellene. The wine is from a small plot that was planted in 1977. The notes tell me that the rootstock used in the plantings was 3309C. However, they don't tell me which clone was used, and that leads me to suspect, although I don't know for sure, that the plantings are likely to have been a Massal selection of Chardonnay from one of their other vineyards, where they've gone in, they've picked the best vines, and they've used those to propagate to plant this vineyard. As I've suggested, the winemaking approach involves hand picking. This is done into 5 kilogram crates so as not to damage the fruit in any way in its transport to the winery. So there's no pressure on the grapes at the bottom of the crate when it's picked. And harvest in 2020, the Clos de la Chapelle took place in a single day on the 27th of August. Fermentation, as mentioned, has gone on with indigenous yeast, and although I assume that fermentation is likely to have gone on in barrel, the notes don't confirm or deny. So it could possibly have been fermented in tank and then put into barrel for malolactic conversion and to age. Certainly the barrels used were French oak. Again, I'm not given a size. It would be reasonable to assume these might be 228 litre Burgundy PS barrels, but for a Bourgogne Chardonnay, it's not impossible that all or some of the wine might go into a larger format barrel. And what we are told is that 10% of the barrels are new, so there may be a touch of vanilla and cedar evident on the palate. All of the wine went through malolactic conversion to soften the acidity and help to add some richness and roundness to the wine. It surprises me slightly that given their low intervention approach to winemaking, they tell us that the wine was fined and filtered, and they also talk about the fact that bentonite was used for fining the wine. The producers suggest that ideally the wine should be aged for 5 to 8 years. Trying this in August 2020, it should be just starting to drink beautifully now. So let's see what we think of it. Firstly, looking at it, this has a pale to medium yellow colour. I think perhaps the colour has become a little darker as a result of its time in bottle. The wine is labelled as having 13% alcohol, and looking at it, it is clinging to the sides of the glass and forming tears quite noticeably there. So let's see what we make of the aroma, shall we? The fruit aromas are quite neutral at first. Really, the aromas are mostly of the lees, a sort of a dairy note, a creamy note, perhaps some mineral notes, perhaps some citric high-tone touches. There isn't an obvious oak, and in fact nothing standing out. Given the fact that the wine has been in bottle for at least 4 years, this has given the different elements within it the chance to marry, so the aromas are quite harmonious. So let's have a taste. It is dry. There really is a richness. Instantly there's quite a ripe sort of peach note right at the front of the mouth. There's a nice freshness, but the peachy richness is overlaying that. I guess there are some citric touches to the acidity, and I am getting some mouth-watering sensation. Really the mid-palate is lovely and rounded. There I think you have a combination of vanilla notes, butterscotch notes, creamy notes, and these rich stone fruit characters, and they're all nicely together. And with the lifted acidity, there's almost a touch of mandarin, kumquat on the mid-palate. There aren't any obvious oak notes, those are all nicely married by now. There's perhaps a minerally, chalky touch to the finish, and what is really good acidity is keeping that lively and fresh to the finish. While the wine principally finishes with those mineral, creamy notes, I can still detect the lovely peachiness. The wine's medium to full-bodied. It's not hugely complex. It is, however, really nicely balanced. It's got a lovely length, and the finish has a nice definition. Looking at the Wine Searcher scores for this wine, there isn't an aggregated critic score for the 2020. However, when you look for all vintages, that has an aggregation of 88 out of 100. I think perhaps this wine justifies a score of something like 89, slightly higher. But although it's a well-made wine, given its simplicity, it probably doesn't deserve a score much higher than that. I will leave a link in the notes below to the Wine Searcher webpage for this vintage of this wine, so that you can see if it's available near you, what other vintages might be available near you, and at what prices, just in case you're interested in trying to find it. So thank you so much for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, do please press the like button. That would be greatly appreciated. If you'd like to watch more of these videos, do please subscribe to my YouTube channel. That would be fantastic. And if you do also set yourself a notification so that you can be alerted every time I publish a new video, and that way you shouldn't miss them. If you have any comments, please pop those in the comments box below. I'd love to know what you think about the wines, the tastings I'm doing, or anything else that relates to that. If you have any friends you think might like to watch the video, do also feel free to pass it on to them. That would be a fantastic endorsement. I'd be very grateful for that. Thank you so much for joining me, and I do hope you'll make some time, come and join me and watch some more videos in the very near future. Till then, bye for now.